Let's talk about the feedback loop between our autism and gaslighting trauma. Warning, this is a theory based on the life experience and pattern recognition of this autistic person and is not a substitute for responsible research. And it may be triggering for autistic people not ready to hold themselves accountable for their trauma responses. As autistic people, we struggle with lying, secrets, and hierarchy because it's confusing to remember different rules with different people. We prefer spaces focused on math, science, and facts because even if we don't agree, we're striving for answers we do agree on. It's uncomfortable for us when we have different experiences than other people under the same circumstances. It can give us anxiety when people have different definitions of the same words. And we can feel crazy if someone remembers the same event differently than we do. All of these things have a common thread: the need to live in the same reality as the people around us. There's an inevitable autism-to-gaslighting trauma pipeline because we have fierce aversions to discomforts that feel very minor to allistic and neurotypical people, and our reactions to certain stimuli strike them as being out of proportion. Ergo, as we were growing up, we were bombarded with feedback that our needs were unreasonable, and we were accused of being hot-headed, demanding, spoiled, entitled, and the like. So we've ravaged our nervous systems trying to suppress any of our needs that aren't shared by the people around us. From my own memory, I once left a concert early because I couldn't stand the noise, and when I searched for my mom, she yelled at me for not enjoying the concert she paid for. I once sat through a movie with my eye in excruciating pain, but waited until it was over to say anything and got yelled at for it anyway. I once sat through an outdoor event freezing and shivering to my bones and said nothing because I didn't want my suffering to become my dad's problem. And it's not just physical discomfort, it's also our cognitive needs. We need more time to process information, and we often need it presented in a particular way for it to make sense to us. Otherwise, we're confused. That confusion is emotionally dysregulating, and the outward presentation of that dysregulation is harshly judged. I remember that my mom, who I believe is an unaware autistic person, had specific trauma around the phrase, "see how you are?" She would script this often whenever she felt invalidated, undoubtedly due to the times she heard that after she had tantrums. We learned that our experiences won't be taken seriously, our needs will not be met, and we won't be socially accepted unless our experience is shared by others. As a result, some of the most benign conversations can trigger panic. When we say we prefer cold weather and someone else says they prefer it hot, or we say we like to stay in and they say they like going out. They probably just feel like they're sharing. But we can feel like we're in an argument and have to defend our preferences for dear life. The anxiety is even worse if they say they don't have needs that we do. Like if they don't need a tidy room to think clearly, if they don't need quiet, or if they don't need literal explanations. We regress to the child who was told they were asking for too much. The unfortunate irony is that now, as adults, we become exactly what we've always been accused of being: unreasonable. We defend our take with a level of aggression that's genuinely out of proportion with the situation. The abuse that traumatized us was very real, but the abuse our trauma is trying to protect us from in the moment is oftentimes completely imagined. But it can be made manifest by our behavior. The person with the contrasting perspective probably wasn't pushing against us at all until we brought unwarranted hostility into the conversation. And since we did, they treat us exactly the way we hate but expect to be treated, like we're out of our minds. Therefore, the trauma response is reinforced and we live out the same cycle over and over again. And since we're locked into a loop that takes any criticism of our hostility as gaslighting, it's a runaway train that can't be stopped until we face it and stop it ourselves. First, we have to face the unmet need underneath it all: loneliness. We feel like our subjective internal reality does not matter to anyone but ourselves because it never has, and we resent that. And while we should all strive to validate our own reality, humanity is a social species, so self-validation will never relieve the suffering of feeling alone. Our trauma will just scream, "It's not fair. Why do I have to carry this weight on my own? I deserve to be heard and believed. I need someone else to care about my pain too." So to heal properly, we need true friends who will believe us when we explain our subjective experiences. And we need to do the same for them. If we want to stop playing this tired zero-sum game, we have to stop making it one. And when the trauma response rises, we have to decide which we trust more: the friend who's just sharing, or the trauma that says they are threatening us by doing so. I can't tell you which to choose, but I can tell you that we will encounter people who experience situations differently than us for the rest of our lives. And whether or not we make enemies of all of them is up to us.